Welcome, brave souls, to the realm of darkness and dreams. As the rain falls softly outside, let the soothing sounds guide you into the unknown. Close your eyes and embrace the shadows that linger just beyond your sight. Remember, in this world of nightmares, nothing is truly safe, and the monsters that hide in the dark are always watching. So take a deep breath, let the darkness envelop you, and prepare for a journey where reality blurs and fear takes form. Sleep tight, if you dare. Get ready to dive into a chilling story about sleep paralysis. Pay close attention, because in this tale, nightmares blur the line between dreams and reality, becoming all too real. Meet Tom, average guy, office job, nothing special, except for one thing. Tom couldn't sleep. Or rather, he could, but he couldn't wake up. Night after night, Tom would find himself trapped, awake but unable to move, unable to speak, unable to scream. And he wasn't alone. In the corner of his room, a figure, dark, shapeless at first. As the nights went on, it got clearer, closer. Tom tried to convince himself it wasn't real, just his mind playing tricks. But deep down, he knew better. One night, as the figure loomed over him, Tom saw its face, and his blood ran cold. It was Jim, his coworker, but not the Jim he knew. This Jim's eyes were empty, his smile too wide, too many teeth. When Tom finally broke free, morning had come. At work, he couldn't look at Jim. Couldn't shake the image of that thing from his mind. That day, Jim didn't come to work. The next day, news spread. Jim was dead, found in his bed. Heart attack, they said. Tom was shaken. But surely it was just a coincidence, right? Wrong. The next night, the figure was back, but different. Now it looked like Sarah from accounting. Same empty eyes, same wrong smile. Tom tried to stay awake, drank coffee by the gallon, but eventually sleep won, and Sarah was there, waiting. The next day, Sarah didn't come to work. The day after, the same news. Another heart attack. Tom was terrified. He knew now, this was no coincidence. Somehow, someway, what he saw in his paralysis was real. And deadly. He started digging. Looked into past deaths at the company. Found a pattern. Every few years, a string of sudden deaths. All ruled as heart attacks. Tom tried to warn people. Tried to explain. But who would believe him? Sleep paralysis demons killing coworkers? It sounded crazy. He stopped sleeping. Lived on energy drinks and fear. But he couldn't stay awake forever. When he finally crashed, figure was waiting. This time, it was his boss, Mr. Johnson. As it approached, Tom noticed something new. A smell, like ozone and rotting flesh. The thing that looked like Mr. Johnson leaned in close. Its mouth opened, wider than any human mouth should, and it began to feed. Tom felt his energy draining, his life slipping away. This was it. This was how he would die. But then a thought struck him. This was his dream. Mind. Maybe, just maybe, he had some control. With every ounce of will he had left, Tom focused. Imagined light. Bright, burning light. Creature screeched, backed away. For the first time, Tom saw fear in those empty eyes. He pushed harder. The light grew brighter. The creature began to smoke, to melt. With a final, ear-splitting shriek, it vanished. Tom woke up. Really woke up. Could move. Could breathe. At work that day, Mr. Johnson was fine. Confused by Tom's intense stare, but fine. The death stopped. Whatever Tom had done, it had worked. But every night, as he lay down to sleep, Tom wondered. Was it really over? Or was something else out there? Waiting? Watching? And somewhere in the darkness between sleep and waking, he swore he could still hear that shriek. So, dear listeners, the next time you find yourself unable to move in the night, ask yourself, is it just a dream? Or is something there feeding on your fear? Remember, not all monsters hide under the bed. Some hide in our minds, waiting for us to close our eyes. Sleep tight if you dare. And may your dreams be free of coworkers with too many teeth and hunger in their eyes. Hey there, nature lovers. Prepare yourselves for a story that might make you rethink your next walk in the woods. I'm about to reveal the eerie tale of the watchful eyes. Stay tuned, because in these trees, not everything is as it appears. Meet the Thompsons. Sarah, Mike, and their 2 kids, Emily and Jake. City folk, looking for a quiet life in the country. They thought they'd found paradise when they bought the old Anderson place. Beautiful house, surrounded by acres of dense forest. If only they knew what was watching them. Started small, feeling of being watched. The prickle on the back of your neck when you're alone, but not really alone. Emily saw them first, tiny pinpricks of light in the darkness beyond her window. Fireflies, but not quite. "Mommy," she said one night, "the trees have eyes." Sarah laughed it off. Kids and their imaginations, right? But then Mike saw them too, out by the shed, as he was locking up for the night. Pair of eyes gleaming in the moonlight, too high up to be a deer, too big to be an owl. They blinked and vanished. Mike told himself it was nothing, just tricks of the light. But he started locking the doors earlier each night. Feeling grew, shadows that moved when no one was there, whispers on the wind that sounded almost like words. Almost, but not quite. Jake's toys started going missing. They'd find them later, arranged in strange patterns at the edge of the woods, like an offering or a warning. Sarah wanted to leave, but Mike had sunk all their savings into this place. They couldn't just walk away. So they stayed, and the eyes multiplied. Dozens of them now, watching from the trees, never blinking, never leaving. The Thompsons stopped going outside after dark, kept the curtains drawn, but still they felt the eyes, always watching, always waiting. One night, a storm hit. Power went out. In the flashes of lightning, they saw them. Figures, standing at the edge of the woods, tall, thin, inhuman. As the thunder crashed, they heard a knock at the door. Mike grabbed a flashlight, approached slowly, opened the door. There, on the porch, stood a man. Not a man. His skin was bark. His hair, leaves, his eyes, those watching eyes. "You are not welcome here," the creature said. Voice like rustling leaves. "This is our land, our home." Mike tried to slam the door, but the creature was too strong. Pushed inside. Behind it, more figures emerged from the woods. Dozens, hundreds. The Thompsons huddled together, terrified. "Please," Sarah begged. "We didn't know. We'll leave. Just let us go." The creature tilted its head, considering. "You have taken what is ours," it said. "You must pay the price." It reached out a gnarled hand, not towards the adults, but towards Emily and Jake. "Young ones," it said, "they will stay, become part of the forest, as all children who wander these woods do." Mike and Sarah fought, tried to protect their children, but they were no match for the strength of the forest. As dawn broke, creatures retreated, back into the woods, taking Emily and Jake with them. Mike and Sarah were found days later, wandering the roads, babbling about trees with eyes and children stolen by the forest. No one believed them, of course. The house stands empty now. No one will buy it. Sometimes, on quiet nights, people say they can hear children's laughter coming from the woods. And if you look closely, you might just see a pair of eyes watching from between the trees. So dear listeners, the next time you're house hunting and come across a beautiful home surrounded by woods, ask yourself, are you ready to face what might be hiding among the trees? Remember, nature has its own rules, its own guardians, and sometimes the price of trespassing is higher than you can imagine. Sleep tight. May your forests be free of watchful eyes and creatures that walk like men. Unless, of course, you're willing to become one with the woods yourself. Listen up, adventurers. Prepare for a story that may change your perspective on your next hiking trip. I'm about to recount the eerie tale of the abandoned cabin. Stay alert, for in these woods, not everything is as it seems. Picture this: 4 friends out for a weekend hike. Jake, Mia, Chris, and Sarah. They'd known each other since college, thought they knew everything about each other. They were wrong. The trail was supposed to be easy. A day trip, nothing more. But as the sun began to set, they realized they were lost. That's when they saw it. Cabin. Old, weathered, but standing. Shelter for the night. As they approached, the woods grew quiet, no birds, no insects, just silent. The door creaked open at Jake's touch. Inside, dust covered everything, but something was off. In the fireplace, ashes, recent ashes. Someone had been here. Recently, Mia found a journal. The last entry was dated just a week ago. It read, "They're coming. God help me, they're coming." Chris laughed it off. "Probably just some nut job," he said, but his laugh sounded hollow. As night fell, they settled in. No choice but to stay. They'd head back at first light. That's when the noises started. Scratching. At first, they thought it was branches on the roof, but it was too rhythmic. Too deliberate. Sarah went to check the windows. She screamed. There, pressed against the glass, a face. Pale, eyes too big, gone in a blink. Panic set in. They huddled together, eyes darting to every shadow. The scratching got louder, now from all sides. Whatever was out there, there were many of them. Jake found a trapdoor, hidden under a rug. It led to a cellar. They didn't want to go down, but they had no choice. In the cellar, they found answers and more questions. The walls were covered in pictures, drawings of creatures, tall, thin, with long arms and those same two big eyes. Newspaper clippings about missing hikers, dozens of them. Going back years, and a video camera, still working. They played the last recording. It showed a man, wild-eyed, terrified. "They took the others," he said. "They'll be back for me. If you see this, run. Don't let them catch you. Don't let them." The video cut off. Above, they heard the cabin door slam open. Heavy footsteps, inhuman growls. They were no longer alone. In the dim light of the cellar, the friends looked at each other. Really looked, and they saw the truth. Chris's eyes, too wide. Sarah's fingers, too long. Jake's smile, too many teeth. Mia backed away. "What are you?" he whispered. She knew. Deep down, she'd always known. Her friends, the real ones, had never made it to the cabin. As the creatures above drew closer, Mia realized the horrible truth. The monsters hadn't invaded the cabin. They had come home. The last thing Mia saw was Jake's face, splitting open like a flower, rows upon rows of teeth. Then darkness. The next day, 4 friends emerged from the woods. They looked normal, acted normal. But if you looked closely, you'd see the eyes, too wide, the smiles, too big. They're out there now, waiting, watching, for the next group of hikers to stumble upon a lonely cabin in the woods. So, dear listeners, the next time you're out hiking and come across an abandoned cabin, think twice before entering. Ask yourself, is it really abandoned, or are its occupants just waiting for fresh meat? Remember, not all monsters hide in the dark. Some walk among us, wearing familiar faces, waiting for the right moment to show their true nature. Sleep tight. May your hikes be free of abandoned cabins and friends who aren't quite what they seem. Unless, of course, that's the adventure you're looking. Hello, curious minds. Get ready for a story that might make you reconsider the idea of digging up the past. I'm here to share the haunting tale of the time capsule. Pay close attention because in this story, the future is intricately tied to the secrets buried in yesterday's soil. Meet our group of friends, Mark, Lisa, Jake, and Emma. Childhood buddies, reunited after 20 years. They thought it would be fun to dig up their old time capsule, relive some memories, share some laughs. Only they knew. It was a crisp autumn day when they gathered in the old park. The tree they'd buried it under was bigger now, older, like them. Mark started digging. The others joked and reminisced. But as the shovel hit metal, a hush fell over the group. Capsule emerged from the earth, rusted but intact. Emma reached for it, then hesitated. A chill ran down her spine. A warning, perhaps, but curiosity won out. They opened it. Inside they found strange things they didn't remember putting there. Toy car, crushed and twisted. Hospital bracelet, a newspaper clipping about a house fire, a black ribbon. "This isn't right," Lisa said. "These aren't our thing." But as they examined each item, a horrible realization dawned. Crushed car, just like the one Jake's daughter had died in last year. The hospital bracelet, the same day Emma's mother had passed away. The newspaper clipping, the very fire that had destroyed Mark's home. And the black ribbon? Lisa recognized it. She'd worn one just like it to her husband's funeral. They stared at each other, fear growing in their eyes. This wasn't a collection of memories. It was a prediction of tragedies. Tragedies that had already come true. But how? Who could have known? As they pondered this, Jake found something else. A note, hidden in the capsule's lid. "The past is prologue," it read. "The future, a curse. What's buried must stay buried, or the worst is yet to come." The handwriting was familiar, childish, but none of them could remember writing it. That night, strange things began to happen. Jake's phone rang, his daughter's ringtone, but she'd been dead for a year. Emma woke to the smell of her mother's perfume. Bottle had been empty for months. Mark heard the crackle of flames, saw smoke where there was none. Lisa felt a hand on her shoulder, a touch she'd thought she'd never feel again. They gathered again, frantic, scared. The capsule sat on the table between them, innocent looking, but they knew better now. "We have to bury it again," Mark said. "Put it back where it came from." They all agreed. But as they stood to leave, there was a knock at the door. Emma opened it and gasped. There, on the doorstep, stood them. But not as they were now. As they had been. Children, smiling with two wide grins, eyes dark and knowing. "You shouldn't have opened it," the child Emma said. "Now the curse is unleashed." "What curse?" Jake demanded. "What's going on?" Child Jake laughed, a hollow, echoing sound. "The curse of knowledge, of seeing the future, of knowing what's to come and being powerless to stop it." "But why?" Lisa asked. "Why us?" Children's smiles grew wider, impossibly wide. "Because you buried us," they said in unison. "You grew up, you forgot, but we didn't. We've been waiting, watching, and now it's time to play." The adults tried to run, but where can you run when the thing chasing you is your own past? One by one they vanished, taken by their childhood selves. Back to the park, back to the hole where the capsule had been buried. The next morning a jogger found the capsule, sitting on top of the freshly turned earth. Inside, 4 new items: a watch, a necklace, a set of keys, a wedding ring, and a new note. "The future is now buried. May those who find it learn from our mistake." They say if you go to that park at night, you can sometimes hear children laughing, playing a game only they understand. So dear listeners, the next time you think about digging up old memories, ask yourself, are you ready to face what might be buried with them? Remember, the past is never truly gone. It's just waiting for the right moment to resurface, and sometimes brings a future you're not prepared to face. Sleep tight, and may your childhood memories remain just that, memory. Unless, of course, you're ready to play a game with your past self. A game where the stakes are your very future. Gather around, pet lovers. Get ready for a story that might make you think twice about your beloved furry friends. I'm about to share the unsettling tale of the cursed family pet. Pay attention, because in this story, not everything is as it appears. Meet the Johnsons, a happy family of 4. Mom, Dad, little Timmy, and of course Max, their beloved golden retriever. Max was more than a pet. He was family, loyal, loving, always there with a wagging tail and a sloppy kiss. Until that fateful day when Max disappeared. The family was heartbroken. They searched for weeks, put up posters, checked shelters, but Max was gone. The year passed. The Johnsons tried to move on. There was always an empty space where Max should have been. Then, on a stormy night, there was a scratch at the door. Timmy opened it, and there was Max, dirty, thin, but alive. The family was overjoyed. Their beloved pet was home. It was a miracle. But miracles, dear listeners, sometimes come with a price. At first, everything seemed fine. Max ate, slept, played like before. But there was something off. His eyes, once warm and brown, now had a strange yellowish glow. And the way he looked at them, not with love, but with hunger. Strange things started happening around the house. Scratches on the walls, growls in the night. The family's other pets, a cat and 2 hamsters, went missing. Max's behavior changed. He no longer wanted to play. He'd sit and stare for hours, at nothing, or at something only he could see. One night, Mom went to check on Timmy. She found Max standing over the boy's bed, growling, teeth bared. She shooed him away, but the image stayed with her. This wasn't their Max, it couldn't be. Dad wanted to take Max to the vet, but every time they tried, Max would disappear, only to show up later as if nothing had happened. The scratching at night got worse, but it wasn't coming from the doors anymore. It was coming from inside the walls. Timmy started talking about Max's friends, shadow creatures that came out at night, that whispered to him, told him to do bad things. The parents were scared. This wasn't just a dog acting strange. This was something else. They called a priest. As soon as he entered the house, Max went berserk, snarling, snapping, eyes glowing like hot coals. The priest took one look and backed away. "This is beyond me," he said. "Whatever came back with your dog, it's not of this world." That night, things came to a head. Family woke to Max's howling, but it wasn't a dog's howl. It was something ancient, primal, evil. They ran to Timmy's room. Max was there, but he wasn't alone. Shadows swirled around him, taking shapes, horrible shapes. In that moment, they saw the truth. This wasn't Max. Not anymore. Their dog had died a year ago. What came back was something else. Something that had been waiting, watching, and now it was ready. The thing that was Max lunged, but not at the family. The shadows. There was a terrible fight. Snarls, screams, flashes of light. When it was over, Max lay still. The shadows were gone. And in the dog's eyes for just a moment, they saw a flicker of the old Max. Their Max. He protected them one last time. As dawn broke, the family buried Max in the backyard. They mourned not once but twice, for the dog they'd lost a year ago and for the one they'd lost again. They never got another pet. The risk was too great, for who knows what might follow it home. So dear listeners, the next time your pet goes missing and returns, look closely. Are those the same loving eyes you remember, or is something else looking back at you? Remember, not all things that return are meant to, and sometimes it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. Sleep tight, and may your pets always be just what they seem. Nothing more, nothing less. Attention, Internet Explorers. Get ready for a story that may change the way you approach your online adventures. I'm about to unveil the chilling tale of the serial killer's website. Stay alert, for in this digital landscape, danger lurks just a click away. Meet our group of friends: Alex, the tech whiz; Zoe, the true crime buff; Marcus, the skeptic; and Jenna, thrill seeker. 4 normal 20-somethings, brought together by an online forum. Their favorite pastime? Exploring the dark corners of the internet. Always pushing boundaries, always looking for the next thrill. But this time, they found something they weren't prepared for. It started with a link, shared by an anonymous user in their chat. For those brave enough, the message said, they should have known better, should have ignored it. But curiosity is a powerful thing. Alex clicked first. The site looked ordinary enough. Forum like many others, but the topics were different. Best places to dump a body, how to remove bloodstains from carpet, foolproof alibis for your next kill. They thought it was a joke, some sick role-playing game, but as they dug deeper, they realized the truth. This wasn't a game. This was real. The users shared details, dates, locations, things only the killer would know. Zoe cross-referenced with unsolved cases. Everything matched. This was a gold mine of information. A network of killers hiding in plain sight. They should have reported it, should have walked away, but they didn't. Instead, they watched, gathered information, thought they were being clever. They were wrong. It started small. Marcus noticed someone following him home from work. Zoe's apartment was broken into, nothing taken. Then came the messages on their phones, their computers, even scrawled on steamy mirrors after showers. We see you. Stop watching. Your turn is coming. They tried to back out, to disconnect, but it was too late. The website changed. Now there was a new section, works in progress. 4 profiles, 4 familiar faces. Theirs. The hunters had become the hunted. They went to the police, but with no proof, no crime committed. What could be done? He tried to hide, changed their names, moved to new cities, but the messages followed. Found you, Alex. Nice new haircut, Zoe. How's the new job, Marcus? That red dress looks lovely on you, Jenna. They were always watching, always one step ahead. The friends turned on each other. Paranoia set in. Who could they trust? Was one of them the mole? Jenna disappeared first, then Marcus. Alex and Zoe went off the grid. No phones, no internet, living like ghosts. For a while, it seemed to work. The messages stopped. Feeling of being watched faded. Then one night, Alex's computer turned on by itself. The screen showed a live video feed. Jenna and Marcus, alive, terrified. A masked figure stood behind them, knife in hand. A message popped up. Choose. Alex looked at Zoe. Zoe looked at Alex. In that moment, they understood the game. To survive, they had to become what they feared, had to join the ranks of those they'd been watching. Figure on the screen tilted its head, waiting. Alex's hand hovered over the keyboard. One name, that's all it would take. But could he do it? Did he condemn a friend to save himself? As his finger descended towards the keys, the screen went black. In the reflection, Alex saw movement behind him. Figure, mask, knife raised. The last thing he heard was Zoe's scream. The website is still out there, waiting, watching, looking for the next curious souls to wander in. So, dear listeners, the next time you're browsing the dark corners of the web, ask yourself, are you the hunter or the hunted? Remember, in the digital world, everything leaves a trace. And some traces lead to places you don't want to go. Sleep tight, and may your online adventures be free of serial killer networks and masked figures waiting in the shadows. Unless, of course, that's the thrill you're seeking. Attention, former students. Get ready for a story that might change how you view your school days. I'm about to tell you the haunting tale of the haunted boarding school. Stay tuned, because in these halls, not all lessons are found in books. Blackthorn Academy, place of prestige, of history, secrets. Its stone walls have stood for centuries, watching, waiting. The students knew the whispers, the odd noises at night, the shadows that moved when no one was there. But they were used to it. It was just part of life at Blackthorn. Then came Alice, new, curious, and unaware of the delicate balance between the living and the dead. On her first night, Alice heard the whispers, but unlike the others, she answered back. That was her first mistake. The next morning, things were different. The air felt heavy, the shadows darker, and Tommy, Alice's roommate, was missing. The teacher said he'd gone home sick, but Alice saw the fear in their eyes. They knew something wasn't right. In class, chairs moved on their own, books fell from shelves, and always the whispers. Alice tried to tell the others what she'd done. They didn't want to hear it. Acknowledging it made it real. That night, another student vanished. Lisa, gone without a trace. Panic set in. Students huddled in groups, afraid to be alone. But it didn't help. One by one, they disappeared. Into empty rooms, down dark hallways, never to be seen again. The teachers were powerless. This was beyond them, beyond anyone. Alice knew it was her fault. She had to fix it. But how do you fight something you can't see? She started digging into the school's history. In the library's dusty archives, she found the truth. Centuries ago, a student was wrongly accused of witchcraft, betrayed by her friends, hunted by her teachers. She cursed the school with her dying breath. Her spirit had always been there, watching, waiting for someone to acknowledge her, to give her the power to seek her revenge. And Alice had done just that. As the sun set on the fifth day, only a handful of students remained. Huddled in the great hall, surrounded by candles, they waited for the inevitable. The whispers grew louder. Shadows danced on the walls. Candles flickered and died. In the darkness, Alice stood. She faced the angry spirit, felt its rage, its pain. "We're sorry," she said. "We understand now. Please, let it end." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a scream, not of anger, but of release. The shadows retreated. The air lightened, and in the corner, figures began to appear. The missing students, shaken, confused, but alive. As dawn broke, Blackthorn Academy stood quiet. The spirit was gone, its curse lifted, but things would never be the same. The students who lived through that week were changed. They knew the power of words, of acknowledgement, and the danger of ignoring the past. Alice stayed at Blackthorn. Someone had to remember, keep the balance, to make sure it never happened again. So dear listeners, if you find yourself in an old school with a long history, listen carefully. If you hear whispers, think twice before you answer. Some conversations are better left unstarted. And remember, not all lessons come from books. Sometimes the most important ones are written in shadows and whispers. Sleep tight, and may your school days be free of vengeful spirits and centuries-old curses. Unless, of course, that's the education you're looking for. Hello, adventurous spirits. Buckle up for a story that might just change your perspective on late-night cab ride. Let me introduce you to the chilling tale of the last ride. Keep your ears open, because in this journey, the destination is far more terrifying than you could ever imagine. Meet Jack, taxi driver for 20 years. Night shift. He'd seen it all, or so he thought. It was a foggy night, kind where the streetlights looked like ghosts, floating in the mist. Jack was about to call it quits when he saw her. A woman, standing on the corner, hand raised to hail a cab. Jack pulled over. She got in. Her face was hidden by a veil, old-fashioned, like something from another time. "Where to, miss?" Jack asked. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. "Take me home." Jack waited for an address. None came. He shrugged, started driving. Fog grew thicker. The city streets faded away. Jack felt uneasy. This wasn't right, but he kept driving. "Miss," he said, "I need an address." She raised a pale hand, pointed ahead. "Just keep going. You'll know when we're there." Jack's hands tightened on the wheel. Something was off. The air in the cab felt cold, too cold. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The woman sat perfectly still. Her veil rippled slightly, but there was no breeze. Jack's heart raced. He tried to focus on the road, but the fog was so thick now he could barely see. Suddenly, the woman spoke again. "Do you remember this place, Jack?" Jack's blood ran cold. He hadn't told her his name. "What do you mean?" he asked. His voice shook. "This road," she said. "You've been here before, on another foggy night, 5 years ago." Jack's mind reeled. 5 years ago. The accident. The one he'd tried so hard to forget. "Who are you?" he demanded. The woman lifted her veil. Jack's heart stopped. It was her. The girl he'd hit that night. The one he'd left there, broken and bleeding on the road. "You left me to die, Jack," she said. Her eyes, hollow and accusing. Jack slammed on the brakes. The taxi screeched to a halt. But when he turned around, the back seat was empty. Outside, the fog cleared. Jack found himself on that same stretch of road, the scene of the accident. He stumbled out of the cab, fell to his knees. The guilt he'd buried for so long came rushing back. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry." A hand touched his shoulder. He looked up. The girl stood there, not as she had been in the cab. Now she was whole, alive. "I've been waiting for you, Jack," she said. "Waiting for you to come back, make it right." Jack nodded, tears streaming down his face. "What do I do?" She pointed down the road. In the distance, Jack saw flashing lights. An accident scene. "Go," she said. "Do what you should have done 5 years ago. Help them." Jack stood, walked towards the lights. With each step, he felt lighter, the guilt lifting. As he reached the accident, he heard sirens in the distance. He knelt beside the injured driver, held their hand, stayed with them until help arrived. When the ambulance left, Jack turned back. The girl was gone, but in the fading mist, he saw his taxi and a figure behind the wheel. As it drove away, Jack understood. His last ride was over, his debt paid. They found Jack's body the next morning, still kneeling by the side of the road, peaceful smile on his face. His taxi was never found, but on foggy nights, people say they sometimes see a cab, driving slowly through the mist, picking up lost souls, giving them one last ride home. So, dear listeners, the next time you hail a cab on a foggy night, take a good look at your driver. Ask yourself, is this a ride to your destination or a journey to face your past? Remember, our mistakes don't disappear. They wait in the mist of memory, ready to take us on one final ride. Sleep tight, and may your travels be free of ghostly passengers and roads that lead to redemption. Unless, of course, you have some unfinished business of your own. Gather round, curious minds. Today I have a spine-chilling story that might just change the way you view your next phone upgrade. Get ready to dive into the eerie legend of the haunted phone. Pay attention, because in our tech-driven world, some calls are better left unanswered. Meet Mike, average guy, office job, nothing special, always looking for a good deal. So when he saw that used smartphone for sale, he couldn't resist. Half the price of a new one, barely a scratch. Perfect. Or so he thought. The first call came at midnight. Unknown number. Mike, half asleep, answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then a whisper. "I know what you did." Mike hung up. Wrong number, he thought, but deep down he felt a chill. The next day, another call. Different number. Same whisper. "The truth will come out, Mike." He blocked the number. But they kept coming, each from a new number, each with a new message. "Remember the red car, Mike? She trusted you. How do you sleep at night?" Mike was scared now. These weren't random calls. They knew things no one should know. He tried to get rid of the phone, threw it in a river. The next morning it was on his bedside table, dry, fully charged. Took it to the store. They found nothing wrong, no strange numbers in the call log, no weird messages. But the calls kept coming. Mike stopped sleeping, stopped eating, jumped at every ring, every buzz. His coworkers noticed. "You okay, Mike? You look terrible." If only they knew. One night, a different call came, a woman's voice, familiar, but he couldn't place it. "Why did you leave me there, Mike? Why didn't you help?" And suddenly he remembered. The red car, the rainy night, accident. He'd sworn he'd called for help, sworn he'd done everything he could. Had he? The memories came flooding back. The fear, panic, running away, leaving her there. The phone rang again. He answered, his hand shaking. "It's time to confess, Mike." He looked up. In his doorway stood a figure, pale, wet, a woman he'd tried so hard to forget. Mike screamed, dropped the phone. It shattered on the floor. Silence fell. The figure was gone. The phone lay in pieces. It was over, or so he thought. The next day, Mike went to the police. Confessed everything. The accident, the hit and run, his years of hiding the truth. As they led him away, his pocket buzzed. Somehow, he still had the phone. One new message: the truth will set you free. He looked at the screen. His reflection stared back. But it wasn't him. The face was pale, wet, familiar. The phone slipped from his hand, shattered again. This time for good. But even as they took him away, Mike knew. Some calls can't be ignored. Some truths can't stay buried. And sometimes the most haunting calls come from within. They say the phone is still out there, passed from one unsuspecting buyer to another, waiting, watching, ready to reveal the secrets we try so hard to hide. So dear listeners, the next time your phone rings in the dead of night, think carefully before you answer. Ask yourself, are you ready to face the truth on the other end of the line? Remember, in this connected world, our devices know more about us than we'd like to admit. And sometimes, they decide it's time for others to know too. Sleep tight, and may your phones be free of ghostly callers and long-buried secret. Unless, of course, you're overdue for a confession. Attention, night dwellers. Prepare yourselves for a story that will instill a sense of dread as the clock strikes midnight. I'm about to unfold the eerie tale of the Midnight Caller. Stay alert, for in this narrative, the past has a way of creeping back when you least expect it. Meet Tom. Successful lawyer, nice house, perfect family. On the surface, he had it all. Tom had a secret. A dark, terrible secret he thought he'd left behind. Then the calls started. Every night, at exactly midnight, his phone would ring. Blocked number. First, he ignored it. The calls kept coming. Finally, one night, he answered. Hello? Silence. Then a whisper. Remember me, Tom? The voice was familiar, too familiar. But it couldn't be. She was gone. Had been for years. Tom hung up, hands shaking. It was just a prank, he told himself. Nothing more. But the next night at midnight, the phone rang again. This time, the voice said more. The bridge, Tom. Do you remember the bridge? Tom's blood ran cold. Bridge. That rainy night, the argument, the screech of tires. He tried so hard to forget. Each night, the calls came. Each night, the voice revealed more. You left me there, Tom? You didn't even look back? Did you think you could just walk away? Tom stopped sleeping. Dark circles formed under his eyes. His wife worried. His kids asked why Daddy looked so scared all the time. He couldn't tell them. Couldn't admit what he'd done. One night, he tried to stay awake past midnight. Thought if he could just avoid the call, it would stop. But at exactly 12, every phone in the house rang. The landline, his cell, his wife's phone, even the kids' tablets, all with the same message. You can't escape me, Tom. He confessed to his wife, told her everything. The accident. The girl he'd left behind. How he'd driven away, too scared to face what he'd done. She left that night, taking the kids. Couldn't bear to look at him. Tom was alone now. Just him and the nightly calls. As days passed, he grew desperate. Went to the police, confessed everything. But without proof, without a body, what could they do? Calls kept coming. Finally, Tom couldn't take it anymore. He drove to the bridge, the scene of the crime he tried so hard to forget. As he stood there, staring into the dark water below, his phone rang. Midnight, on the dot. He answered, one last time. What do you want from me? He screamed. Voice, clearer now, replied, Justice, Tom. I want justice. And then he saw her, standing at the other end of the bridge, pale, wet, just like that night years ago. Tom stepped closer. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. She held out her hand. Tom reached for it, and then he was falling. The cold water rushed up to meet him. As he sank into the darkness, his phone rang one last time. The screen glowed in the murky water. Justice is served. Read. The next morning, a jogger found Tom's car, empty, parked by the bridge. His phone lay on the driver's seat. At exactly midnight, it rang. The jogger answered. Hello? Silence. Then a whisper. Do you believe in second chances? They say if you stand on that bridge at midnight, you can still hear a phone ringing. A reminder that some calls can't be ignored and some debts must be paid. So dear listeners, the next time your phone rings at midnight, think carefully before you answer. Ask yourself, are you ready to face the consequences of your past? Remember, in the dead of night, when the world is quiet, our guilt speaks the loudest, and sometimes it calls collect. Sleep tight, and may your nights be free of mysterious callers and long-buried secret. Unless, of course, you have some explaining to do. Hey there, night owls. Get ready for a story that will make you reconsider your next late-night snack. Let me take you into the mysterious world of the last customer. Stay sharp, because in this diner, the special of the day might just be your soul. Meet Sarah, waitress at Joe's all-night diner. 30 years on the job, seen it all. Or so she thought. It was a quiet night, the kind where the tick of the clock seems too loud, the hum of the neon sign outside, almost deafening. Then at exactly 3:33 a.m., the bell above the door jingled. In walked a man, tall, thin, dressed all in black. Face? Sarah couldn't quite focus on it, like trying to remember a dream. He sat at the counter, didn't speak, just stared at the menu. Sarah approached. "What'll it be, hon?" The man looked up, his eyes empty, bottomless, like staring into a starless night sky. "I'll have the Sinner's Special," he said, his voice a whisper that somehow filled the entire diner. Sarah froze. The Sinner's Special. It hadn't been on the menu for years, not since that night, the night of the fire, the night old Joe. She shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir. We don't serve that anymore." The man smiled. "Too wide. Too many teeth." "Oh, but you do. For me, you do." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but she nodded, turned to the kitchen. As she cooked, strange things began to happen. The lights flickered. The radio turned on by itself, playing an old song. One Sarah hadn't heard in years. She glanced at the clock. 3:45 a.m. But that couldn't be right. It had been 3:33 just a moment ago. The smell of smoke filled the air. Sarah looked around, panicked. But there was no fire. Just that man, still sitting at the counter, waiting, watching. As she plated the meal, Sarah's hands shook. This wasn't right. None of this was right. She turned back to the counter. The man was gone. In his place sat old Joe. But that was impossible. Joe had died in the fire, 30 years ago. Through the day, Joe smiled at her, sad, tired. "It's time, Sarah," he said. "Time to remember." And suddenly she did. The argument, the knocked-over candle, the flames spreading so fast. Joe trapped in the kitchen, Sarah running away, leaving him there. She'd blocked it out, convinced herself she'd tried to save him, but she hadn't. She'd run, and she'd been running ever since. Sarah fell to her knees. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." Joe's form flickered. For a moment he was the man in black again, then back to Joe. 30 years, he said. 30 years I've waited. For you to remember. For you to admit the truth. Sarah looked up. "What happens now?" Joe held out his hand. "Now? Now we go home." As Sarah took his hand, the diner faded away. The smell of smoke grew stronger. In the distance, a siren wailed. But it was too late. Far too late. The next morning, they found the diner in ashes. No sign of Sarah. Just a half-eaten plate of food at the counter. A meal no one remembered being on the menu. They say on quiet nights you can still hear the jingle of the bell, still smell coffee brewing, and if you listen closely, you might just hear Sarah's voice asking, "What'll it be, hon?" So dear listeners, the next time you find yourself in a late-night diner, think carefully about what you order. Ask yourself, are you ready to face what's really on the menu? Remember, in the darkest hours of the night, when the world is asleep, our past has a way of catching up with us. And sometimes it comes with a side of fries. Sleep tight, and may your midnight snacks be free of ghostly customers and long-buried secrets. Unless, of course, you're overdue for a reckoning. We hope you enjoyed this chilling tale. If it sent shivers down your spine, give us a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. What was your favorite part? Don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss a scare. Until next time, stay spooky and remember, sometimes the darkest shadows hide the most terrifying secret.